When Jake Morrison closed the door to Natalie Cross's corner office on the 42nd floor, he thought he was getting fired.
Still that noise?
The summons had
Yeah.
come through
Let's
Elena
run a quick
Parker,
test.
the CEO's
Okay, that should
assistant.
clear it.
Her voice clipped and
We need to talk
professional
about
over the
this,
phone.
now.
I know.
Mr.
What's wrong?
Morrison,
This
Ms.
can't
Cross
wait, it's
needs
serious.
To see you
Okay,
immediately.
tell me.
No explanation, no context. Just the kind of directive that made a maintenance supervisor's stomach drop. He'd been fixing the HVAC system on 38 when the call came, his hands black with grease, his Navy work uniform soaked through with sweat from 3 hours inside a ductwork chase. The building's air conditioning had failed during yesterday's board meeting, and Jake knew exactly whose fault that would become in the executive narrative. Maintenance always took the blame when systems failed, never the penny-pinching facilities management company that refused to approve the compressor replacement he'd requested 6 months ago. The elevator ride up 4 floors felt like ascending to a courtroom. Jake caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. At 34, he looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the past 6.5 years, carved there by sleepless nights and the weight of single fatherhood. His brown hair needed a cut. His work boots were scuffed beyond saving. He'd washed his hands in the 38th floor men's room, but traces of lubricant still darkened his fingernails. Natalie Cross's office occupied the building's northwest corner, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing Chicago's skyline in brutal clarity. Jake had been inside exactly twice before, once to install a new thermostat control when she'd first moved into the space 3 years ago, and once to fix a rattling vent that had disrupted her morning conference calls. Both times she'd barely acknowledged his presence beyond a curt nod, her attention fixed on whatever crisis commanded her laptop screen. This time she stood when he entered. The door clicked shut behind him with a sound that felt final. Natalie moved from behind her glass desk, and Jake registered details his maintenance-focused brain usually filtered out. She was 39 according to the building directory. Tall, maybe 5'8", with dark hair pulled back in the severe style she favored for work. Her eyes were brown sharp with the kind of intelligence that had built Vanguard Solutions from a garage startup into a Fortune 500 consulting firm. She wore a Ralph Lauren suit that probably cost more than Jake's monthly rent, the charcoal fabric tailored to perfection. Her hands were shaking. Jake's instinct for reading trouble kicked in immediately. This wasn't anger. This was fear. "Close the door." Her voice came out quieter than he'd ever heard it. The executive authority had drained away, leaving something rawer underneath. He'd already closed it, but Jake reached back and verified the latch anyway, buying himself 3 seconds to scan her face for clues. Natalie Cross didn't do fear. In the 4 years he'd worked at Millennium Tower, he'd watched her navigate this building like she owned it, which technically she didn't, but her company's lease agreement covered 3 full floors and anchored the tower's financial stability. She commanded rooms. She made grown men in $1,000 suits nervous. Right now, she looked like she might shatter. "Sit down." She gestured to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. Jake sat. The chair was expensive, ergonomic, designed for comfort during long strategy sessions. It felt like a witness stand. Through the glass walls that separated Natalie's office from the executive floor, he could see other employees moving through their Wednesday afternoon routines. Nobody could hear what happened in this soundproofed space. Natalie had paid extra for that feature when the build-out happened. "I'm going to tell you something." She removed the designer glasses she wore for computer work, setting them on the desk with deliberate care. "I need you to let me finish before you respond." "All right." Jake's voice sounded strange in his own ears, too steady for the adrenaline now flooding his system. Natalie took a breath, held it, released it slowly. "I'm pregnant." The words landed in the space between them like something solid, something that couldn't be unsaid or ignored. Jake's mind went immediately to logistics, maternity leave, interim leadership. How this would affect the merger talks with the Seattle firm that had been dominating executive floor gossip for months. It was reflex, the way his brain always jumped to problem-solving mode when presented with new information. Then Natalie spoke again, and every logical thought evaporated. "The baby's yours." For a heartbeat, just one suspended moment, Jake thought he'd misheard, but Natalie's eyes held his steady and unflinching. and he knew she'd said exactly what he thought she'd said. 3 months ago, the industry conference in Denver, the hotel bar after the final panel when they'd both been exhausted and honest in a way they never were in the polished performance of professional life. Jake had been sent to the Building Technology Summit because his expertise in HVAC automation systems made him the logical choice when the facilities management company needed someone to represent their maintenance capabilities. Natalie had been there for the Smart Building Integration panel, speaking about Vanguard's software solutions. They'd recognized each other in the hotel bar at 11:30 at night. She'd been drinking whiskey neat. He'd been nursing a beer he didn't really want, just grateful to be away from his apartment and the memories that haunted every corner. The conversation had started professionally, then drifted into territory neither of them had planned. The loneliness of success, Natalie had said. The impossibility of dating when you're raising a daughter alone, Jake had admitted. The kiss had surprised them both. The walk to her room had felt inevitable and terrifying and completely unlike anything Jake had done since Julia died. They'd agreed the next morning over awkward coffee in the hotel lobby that it had been a mistake. Not because it wasn't good, it had been startlingly, dangerously good. But because they worked in the same building, because the power dynamic was impossible, because they were both too scarred to pretend casual, meant anything other than complicated. They'd flown home on separate flights, returned to the office, and never spoke of it again. Jake had convinced himself it was a closed chapter. Biology had other plans. How far along? His voice came out calm, like he was asking about a project deadline. 11 weeks. Natalie's hands were clasped so tightly on the desk that her knuckles had gone white. I found out 6 days ago. I've been to 2 doctors. Both confirmed it. I wanted to be absolutely certain before I said anything. Jake's mind raced through calculations. 11 weeks meant she was almost through the first trimester, the high-risk period for miscarriage that every pregnancy book emphasized. He'd read those books 6.5 years ago, sitting in hospital waiting rooms while Julia underwent chemotherapy, preparing for a daughter who would arrive into a world already marked by loss. I need you to understand something. Natalie's voice had that controlled quality she used in board meetings, each word carefully chosen. I'm not asking you for anything. Not money, not involvement, not even acknowledgement. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, but I don't expect anything to change. I'm fully prepared to handle this alone. The words sparked something hot in Jake's chest. You think I'd walk away? I think you're a single father with a 7-year-old daughter and a career you've built through incredible discipline. Natalie's expression didn't change, but her voice softened slightly. I think this is probably the last thing you need in your life right now. And I wouldn't blame you for wanting to pretend this conversation never happened. Jake stood abruptly, walking to the windows because he needed to move, needed to do something with the energy suddenly coursing through him. Below, the city stretched out in geometric precision, streets and buildings and lives intersecting in patterns that made sense from up here. Down there, in the actual mess of human existence, nothing was ever this clear. I lost my wife when Sophie was 6 months old. He spoke to the glass, not turning around, using the old name that only existed in his private grief. Lily. Her name is Lily. But for the first 6 months, Julia had called her Sophie, the name they'd chosen together, and Jake had kept using it in his head, even after he'd legally changed it to honor his wife's final request. Breast cancer. She was diagnosed when Lily was 3 months old. Dead before our daughter's first birthday. The facts came out flat, the way they always did when he spoke about Julia. Emotion was a luxury he'd learned to lock away when it came to those memories. Do you know what I remember most from that time? Natalie didn't answer. Jake turned to face her. I remember the look in Julia's eyes when she knew she was dying. Not fear for herself, fear that Lily would grow up without a mother, fear that I'd have to do this alone. Her last coherent words to me were, "Don't let her forget me." He moved back to the chair but didn't sit. I've spent 6.5 years being both parents, learning to braid hair and pack lunches and explain why Mommy can't come to the school play. Lily has asked me exactly once why she doesn't have a mother like other kids, and I had to tell my 6-year-old daughter that sometimes people we love get sick and don't get better." His hands had curled into fists. Jake forced them open, forced his voice level. "So no, Natalie, I'm not walking away. I don't care how complicated this is or how it looks or what it means for our careers. There's a child coming who's going to need a father, and I know exactly what happens when a kid grows up with only one parent because the other one isn't there. I won't let that happen. Not again. Not ever." The silence that followed was absolute. Natalie stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language, like his response had been so far outside her expectations that she needed time to translate it. "Jake," her voice came out small. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He sat down again, leaning forward. "Tell me what you need." "I don't need anything." "That's not an answer. You're 11 weeks pregnant. Have you told anyone else?" "No." Natalie looked away. "I wanted to tell you first. I thought, I don't know what I thought, that you'd need time to process it, that maybe you'd want to discuss options." "Options?" The word tasted bitter. "You mean termination. I mean that this is early enough that all possibilities are still on the table, and I wanted you to know that whatever decision gets made, it's not your burden to carry." Natalie's voice was steady, but Jake could hear the strain underneath. "I'm financially secure. I have excellent health insurance. I can provide for this child without disrupting your life." Jake felt something crack in his chest. "Do you want this baby?" The question hung between them, naked and essential. Natalie's composure finally fractured. Her eyes went bright with something that might have been tears, though she didn't let them fall. "I'm 39 years old." The words came slowly, each one heavy. "I've spent 20 years building a company. I've never wanted children, never saw them fitting into my life. I've been on birth control since I was 16, never missed a pill, never had a scare." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Apparently antibiotics can interfere with hormonal contraceptives. I had a sinus infection in Denver, took a Z-Pack. Didn't think anything of it because why would I?" "And now," Jake prompted gently, "and now I can't stop thinking about it. About this little cluster of cells that's going to become a person. A person who will have your eyes, maybe, or my stubbornness. A person who didn't ask to exist but exists anyway, because two adults made a decision one night without considering all the variables." Natalie looked up at him. "I don't know if I want this baby, Jake. I know I should. I know the right answer is supposed to be clear, but I'm terrified and confused and completely out of my depth, and I hate feeling this way." Jake understood that feeling. He'd lived it when Julia got diagnosed, when the doctors had laid out treatment options that all sounded like different flavors of hopeless, when he'd had to make decisions about his wife's body, her suffering, her final months, knowing that every choice might be the wrong one. "You don't have to decide everything today, but I need you to hear me. Whatever you choose, you're not doing it alone. If you decide to continue this pregnancy, I'm in, fully, completely, not as an obligation or a burden, but as a father who wants to be there." He paused. "And if you decide you can't do this, I'll support that too. But I need to be part of the conversation. This isn't just happening to you." Natalie's laugh was shaky. "You're taking this remarkably well." "I'm not." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "I'm absolutely losing my mind. I just happen to be very good at compartmentalizing. Give me about 3 hours and I'll probably have a complete breakdown in my truck. That's fair." Natalie returned the smile, tentative but genuine. "I'm scheduling my first real appointment for next week. Ultrasound, full workup. Do you want to be there?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "Text me the details. I'll clear my schedule." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they'd said settling around them like dust after an explosion. Through the glass walls, Jake could see other employees moving past, oblivious to the fact that two lives had just realigned completely. "We should talk about work." Natalie's voice had regained some of its executive steadiness. "Eventually. About how this affects our positions here. Later." Jake stood. "Right now, you need to process this, and I need to figure out how to tell my 7-year-old that she's going to be a big sister." Natalie's eyes widened. "You're going to tell Lily? She's my daughter. I don't keep things from her." Not the important stuff. Jake moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. I learned with Julia that kids can handle a lot more truth than we think. It's the lies and the secrets that damage them. What if she hates me? What if she resents the baby? Lily's the most empathetic person I know. She cried for a week when her goldfish died. Jake looked back at Natalie. Give her some credit. And give yourself some too. You're stronger than you think. I run a Fortune 500 company, Jake. I know I'm strong. That's not the kind of strength I'm talking about. He left before she could respond, walking through the executive floor with steady steps that belied the chaos in his head. His office was 3 doors down, smaller than Natalie's, but still impressive by maintenance supervisor standards. The facilities management company had given him the space as part of his promotion 2 years ago, recognizing that the guy who kept Millennium Towers systems running deserved better than a basement workstation. Jake closed the door and sat at his desk, staring at the framed photo of Lily that lived next to his computer. She was grinning in that picture, missing her 2 front teeth, chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin. Julia had taken it 2 months before she died, one of the last good days when she'd had enough strength to take their daughter to the park. Jake kept it there as a reminder of why he worked the hours he did, why he pushed for every promotion and fought for every raise. Now there would be another child, another mouth to feed, another college fund to build, another life depending on him to not screw things up. The breakdown he'd predicted came right on schedule. He put his head in his hands and let himself feel it. The terror, the impossibility, the sheer overwhelming magnitude of what came next. He gave himself 5 minutes. Then he pulled out his phone and called the one person who might understand. Marcus. His voice was steady again. I need to talk. The playground at Lily's school was mostly empty when Jake arrived for pickup. He was early deliberately so, needing time to compose himself and figure out what he was going to say. Through the chain-link fence he could see the second graders streaming out of the building, a chaotic river of backpacks and shouting. Lily spotted him immediately. She always did. His daughter had an uncanny ability to find him in any crowd, some combination of hyper-awareness and love that never failed to make his chest ache. Dad. Dad, guess what happened in math today? She waved her blonde ponytail, bouncing as she ran toward the gate. Jake caught her as she barreled into his legs, lifting her into a hug that she was probably getting too old for but hadn't outgrown yet. She smelled like pencil shavings and the strawberry shampoo she'd insisted on buying last week. What happened in math, sweetheart, mister? Peterson let me explain fractions to the whole class because I got all the problems right, and he said I was a natural teacher. Lily's face was bright with pride. Can you be a teacher when you're also a scientist? Because I still want to study space, but maybe I could teach other people about space too. You can be anything you want. Jake set her down. As long as you work hard and stay curious. They walked to the car, hand in hand, Lily chattering about her day and the way she did when something good had happened. Jake let her talk, using the familiar rhythm of her voice to steady himself. This was his life. School pickups and homework help and bedtime stories. Simple things that had somehow become sacred in the years since Julia died. Now he was about to complicate everything. He waited until they were home, until Lily had hung up her backpack and washed her hands and was settled at the kitchen table with her afternoon snack. Apple slices and peanut butter carefully arranged the way she liked. Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in Pilsen, but clean and filled with evidence of their life together. Lily's artwork covered the refrigerator. Julia's photos smiled from the bookshelf. Everything had its place. Bug, I need to talk to you about something important. Lily looked up, instantly alert. At 7, she already had Julia's intuition, that ability to read the emotional temperature of a room and respond accordingly. Her eyes searched his face. Are you sick? The question hit Jake like a fist. Of course she'd go there first. Sickness was what had taken her mother. No honey, nothing like that. Jake reached across the table, covering her small hand with his. Do you remember a few months ago when I went to that conference in Denver? I was gone for 4 days. Lily nodded slowly. You brought me back a snow globe. That's right. Well, While I was there, I spent time with Ms. Cross. You remember her? She's my boss. You met her at the company picnic last summer. The lady with the pretty watch. Lily's brow furrowed. Did something bad happen? No, not bad. Just unexpected. Jake took a breath. This was harder than he'd anticipated, and he'd anticipated it being nearly impossible. Ms. Cross and I became very close friends during that trip, and now she's going to have a baby. The baby is going to be my child, which means it's going to be your little brother or sister. He watched his daughter process this, her face cycling through confusion, surprise, and something that might have been calculation. Lily was frighteningly smart for her age, capable of making connections that sometimes startled him. Is Ms. Cross going to be my new mom? No, sweetheart. Ms. Cross and I aren't married. We're not even dating, but we're going to work together to take care of this baby the same way I take care of you. Lily set down her apple slice. Are you going to love the baby more than me? The question drove straight through Jake's heart. He came around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. Lily, listen to me. I will never ever love anyone more than I love you. You're my first girl, my bug, my whole heart. That doesn't change. Love doesn't work like a pie where you only have so many slices to give out. It grows. When this baby comes, I'm going to love them too. But it won't take anything away from what I feel for you. Do you understand? Promise? I promise. Jake pulled her into his arms, feeling her small frame against his chest. You're always going to be my number one. They stayed like that for a long moment. When Lily pulled back, she was calmer, though her forehead was still creased with thought. Is Ms. Cross scared? The question surprised him. Why would you think that? Because when Amanda's mom had a baby last year, Amanda said her mom cried a lot before it came. She said having babies is scary even when you want them. Lily tilted her head. Does Ms. Cross want the baby? Jake sat back on his heels, struck by his daughter's insight. Out of everything they'd discussed, Lily had zeroed in on the one question that mattered most. I think she's figuring that out. Honestly, having a baby is a big change, and sometimes big changes are scary even for grown-ups. You should tell her it's going to be okay. Lily spoke with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never doubted her father's ability to fix things. You're really good at being a dad. You can help her learn. Something in Jake's throat went tight. You're pretty amazing, you know that. Lily grinned. I know. Can I have more apple slices? Yes, you can. He got up, moving to the counter to cut more fruit. His hands remarkably steady considering the conversation they'd just had. Behind him, Lily had already returned to her snack, the crisis apparently resolved in her 7-year-old mind. If only adult problems were so easily solved. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Natalie. Appointment scheduled for next Wednesday, 2 p.m. I'll send you the address. Jake typed back. I'll be there. Another buzz. Thank you for everything you said today. I didn't expect... She didn't finish the sentence. Jake waited, but no follow-up came. He understood. There were things too complicated to put into words, feelings too new to articulate. They'd figure it out. They had to. Dad! Lily's voice pulled him back. When the baby comes, can I help take care of it? Jake turned, finding his daughter watching him with hopeful eyes. Of course you can, Bug. You're going to be the best big sister ever. I'll teach them about space. Lily's declaration was matter-of-fact. And fractions. And how to make really good chocolate milk. That sounds perfect. That night after Lily was asleep, Jake stood in the doorway of her room watching her breathe. She looked so small under her star-patterned comforter, her blonde hair spread across the pillow. She'd wanted to keep her nightlight on, the one shaped like the moon that Julia had bought years ago. It cast soft shadows across the walls, familiar and comforting. 6.5 years of this. 6.5 years of being everything Lily needed, of making every decision alone, of carrying the full weight of parenthood on his shoulders. He'd gotten good at it, better than he'd ever imagined possible when Julia died and left him drowning in grief and terror. Now there would be another child, another set of midnight feedings and first words and skinned knees, another person depending on him to get it right. But this time he wouldn't be completely alone. Natalie would be there. And while they weren't together, while this wasn't the family structure he'd imagined when Julia was alive, and they'd talked about having more kids someday, it was something. A partnership built on honesty and mutual respect, and a shared commitment to doing right by this child they'd created. It would have to be enough. Jake's phone buzzed again, another text from Natalie. "I can't sleep. Keep thinking about everything." He stepped out into the hallway, closing Lily's door quietly. "Me too. Did you tell Lily?" "Yes. She asked if you were scared." A long pause. "Then, what did you say?" "That you're figuring things out. That big changes are scary for everyone. I am scared. Terrified, actually. I've run this company through 3 economic downturns and a hostile takeover attempt, and none of that was as frightening as seeing those 2 lines on the pregnancy test." Jake sat down on the top step, phone in hand. "Fear means you understand what's at stake. That's not a bad thing." "How are you so calm about this?" "I'm not calm. I'm just practiced at functioning while terrified. 6 years of single parenthood will do that. I don't know how to be a mother, Jake. I don't have the first clue." He thought about Julia, about how she'd been so naturally good with Lily from the moment she was born, how she'd made it look effortless, even when Jake knew she was exhausted, even when the cancer was eating her alive from the inside. But he also thought about himself, about those first terrible months after she died, when he'd had to learn everything from scratch. How to soothe a crying infant at 3 a.m, how to make bottles and change diapers and sing lullabies in his rough, off-key voice, how to be enough when he felt like nothing. Nobody knows how to be a parent until they are one. You learn, you make mistakes, you try again. And somehow the kid turns out okay. Lily's more than okay. She's extraordinary. She's a good kid. Takes after her mom. Another pause. "I'm glad you told her, that she didn't hate the idea. She asked if she could help take care of the baby. Said she'd teach them about space and fractions." Jake could almost hear Natalie's laugh through the screen. She's 7. She's 7 going on 30. Trust me, by the time this baby arrives, she'll have a whole curriculum planned out. I'm going to try to sleep. Thank you for today, for not running. I meant what I said. You're not alone in this. Good night, Jake. Good night." He sat there for a while longer, phone dark in his hand, listening to the quiet sounds of his apartment, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the old furnace clicking as it cycled, Lily's soft breathing through her closed door. 7 months from now, maybe less, if the baby came early, all of this would change. His carefully constructed life, the routines he'd built to keep himself and Lily stable, the balance he'd worked so hard to maintain. All of it would shift to accommodate this new person who didn't even exist yet in any tangible way. Jake thought about Natalie's face in that office, about the fear underneath her composure. He thought about Lily's question, "Is she scared?" Yeah, she was scared. So was he. But fear had never stopped him before. It hadn't stopped him when Julia got sick, when the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. It hadn't stopped him when he'd held his newborn daughter for the first time after her mother died, when he'd looked into those tiny, trusting eyes and promised to be enough for her. It wouldn't stop him now. Jake pulled out his phone one more time, opening his calendar. Next Wednesday, 2 o'clock, the ultrasound appointment. He blocked it off, adding a reminder. Then he scrolled forward, looking at the months stretching ahead. July. That's when Natalie said the due date would be if she was 11 weeks now. July meant summer, meant Lily would be out of school, meant he'd need to figure out childcare arrangements, make sure his parental leave was approved, prepare the apartment for an infant. July felt impossibly close and impossibly far away at the same time. He stood, joints creaking slightly. At 34, he sometimes felt 20 years older. The apartment was dark except for the night lights, little pools of illumination guiding the way. Jake moved through them, automatically checking locks, turning off forgotten lights, performing the nightly rituals that marked the end of another day. In his own room, he paused at the dresser where Julia's picture still lived. She was laughing in it, her head thrown back, completely unself-conscious. Jake had taken it on their honeymoon in Hawaii when they were young and stupid and convinced they had all the time in the world. "I don't know what I'm doing." The words came quietly, directed at the photograph. "I know you'd probably have advice, something wise about rolling with life's punches or trusting the process, but I'm making this up as I go, Jules, just like I did when you left." The picture didn't answer. It never did. But sometimes talking to it helped anyway, made him feel less alone in the decision-making. "Lily's going to be okay. She's tougher than both of us put together. And Natalie, I think she's going to surprise herself. She's already stronger than she knows." He touched the frame gently. "I'll take care of them. All of them. I promise." Jake got ready for bed mechanically, his mind already spinning toward tomorrow. He'd need to talk to Natalie about prenatal vitamins, about her OB/GYN, about whether she had someone to go to appointments with before next Wednesday. He'd need to research pregnancy at 39, understand the risks, be prepared for complications. He'd need to tell Marcus, his brother-in-law, who'd become his closest confidant after Julia died. The list was endless, overwhelming. But Jake had learned long ago that you didn't solve overwhelming problems all at once. You broke them down into manageable pieces. You handled what was in front of you, then moved to the next thing. Tomorrow, he'd start with making sure Natalie had everything she needed. Today, he'd survived the initial shock, had the hard conversation with Lily, had promised to show up. That was enough for now. Jake lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy. His mind was too active, too full of variables and scenarios and what-ifs. But eventually exhaustion would win. It always did. Somewhere across the city, Natalie was probably lying awake too, thinking the same thoughts, fighting the same fears. The idea of her alone in some pristine apartment surrounded by the markers of her successful but solitary life bothered him more than he wanted to admit. She wasn't his responsibility, not beyond the baby. They weren't together, weren't building a relationship beyond co-parenting. She'd made that clear and he'd accepted it. But Lily's question echoed in his mind. Is she scared? Yes, and scared people shouldn't have to be alone. Jake made a decision. Tomorrow after work he'd check in, not as a colleague, not as the father of her unborn child, but as another human being navigating impossible circumstances. He'd offer company if she wanted it, space if she didn't, and the steady presence of someone who understood that sometimes just showing up was enough. It was the least he could do. And maybe in the 7 months ahead, it would be the foundation of something neither of them expected, but both of them needed. Outside Chicago settled into its nighttime rhythm. Somewhere in this vast, indifferent city, two people were learning to share a burden neither had planned for. And one 7-year-old girl was dreaming of teaching her future sibling about the stars, completely confident that her father could handle anything. Jake closed his eyes and tried to believe she was right. The morning came with the sharp edge of reality that no amount of sleep could dull. Jake woke at 5:30, habit more than alarm, and lay still for a moment while his mind caught up to what had happened yesterday. Pregnant. Natalie Cross was pregnant with his child. The words felt foreign even in the privacy of his own thoughts, like vocabulary from a language he'd stopped speaking years ago. He moved through the morning routine on autopilot. Shower. Coffee. Wake Lily. The kitchen smelled like the oatmeal he'd started on the stove, cinnamon and brown sugar the way his daughter liked it. Lily appeared in her pajamas, hair sticking up in directions that defied physics, and climbed into her chair without fully opening her eyes. Morning bug. She mumbled something that might have been a greeting. Jake set a bowl in front of her and watched as she slowly came to life, one spoonful at a time. This was his world. Simple, predictable, safe. Except nothing was simple anymore. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from the facilities management company's regional director. Need you at the Riverside Commerce Building today. HVAC failure. 3rd floor. Client demanding immediate response. Jake stared at the message, then at Lily eating breakfast, then at the clock showing 6:15. He typed back, "Can't today. Family emergency. Send Rodriguez." The response came within seconds. "This is priority 1. Client is threatening to break contract." Jake's thumb hovered over the screen. 6.5 years of putting work first, of being the reliable guy who showed up no matter what, of proving that a single father could be just as committed as anyone else. 6.5 years of sacrifices that had earned him the supervisor position, the tiny office, the respect of people who thought maintenance workers were interchangeable. "Send Rodriguez or handle it yourself. I'm not available." He turned off his phone. Lily looked up from her oatmeal, sensing the shift in atmosphere the way she always did. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." But he was worrying. Not about the job, about what came next. The appointment with Natalie was 6 days away, and until then he had no roadmap for how to navigate this bizarre new territory they'd entered. The week crawled by in a series of moments that felt both ordinary and surreal. Jake returned to work Wednesday afternoon, weathering a tense conversation with his supervisor about reliability and professional commitments. He fixed the Riverside building's HVAC system Thursday morning, working twice as fast to make up for lost time. He picked Lily up from school every day at 3:15, helped with homework, made dinner, and forced bedtime. And through it all, Natalie existed in his peripheral vision. Not physically, he'd avoided the 42nd floor since Tuesday, but as a constant awareness humming beneath everything else. She texted him twice, once to confirm the appointment details, once to ask if he'd told anyone besides Lily. Jake had called Marcus Williams on Tuesday night after Lily was asleep. His brother-in-law had listened in silence as Jake explained the situation, then let out a long breath that spoke volumes. "Bro, you know what you're getting into." Marcus's voice had carried the weight of someone who'd watched his sister die and then watched Jake rebuild a life from the wreckage. CEO and maintenance guy. That's a Hallmark movie, not real life. It's already real life. She lives in a penthouse. You live in Pilsen. How's this supposed to work? We'll figure it out. Marcus had gone quiet for a beat. "You're falling for her." "No." Jake had denied it immediately, automatically. "I'm helping the mother of my child." "Right. And I'm the Easter Bunny." The conversation had ended there, but Marcus's words lingered. Jake wasn't falling for Natalie. He barely knew her beyond professional pleasantries, and one night in Denver that had been more about loneliness than connection. This was about responsibility, about doing right by a child who hadn't asked to be conceived in a hotel room by two people who should have known better. That's what he told himself anyway. Wednesday arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that made Chicago beautiful and unforgiving in equal measure. Jake had arranged for Marcus to pick up Lily from school. He'd changed out of his work uniform into the cleanest pair of jeans he owned and a button-down shirt that still fit from when he'd been younger and occasionally had reasons to dress up. The medical building was downtown, all glass and steel that caught the afternoon sun. Jake arrived by bus because the idea of parking his battered F-150 in the underground garage felt like advertising every difference between himself and the life Natalie inhabited. The lobby directory listed Northwestern specialists in obstetrics on the 3rd floor. He took the stairs. Natalie was already in the waiting room when he arrived, and Jake's first thought was that she looked tired. The professional armor she wore at work had been replaced by dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back. Without the severe styling, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "You came." There was surprise in her voice, like she'd prepared herself for disappointment. "I said I would." They checked in at the desk, then found seats in the corner. The waiting room was painted in soft blues and greens, clearly designed to be calming. Other women sat in various stages of pregnancy, some alone, some with partners, one with what looked like her entire extended family. An older woman with kind eyes glanced at Jake and Natalie, then smiled as if she knew their story. Jake wondered what story she thought she saw. "I've never been this nervous before a meeting." Natalie's hands were clasped in her lap, fingers woven together so tightly the knuckles had gone pale. Jake reached over and covered her hands with one of his own. "It's going to be fine. You don't know that." "No, but I believe it anyway." The gesture seemed to surprise her. She looked down at their hands, then up at his face, searching for something Jake couldn't name. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Natalie Cross. They stood together. Jake followed Natalie down a hallway lined with educational posters about fetal development and breastfeeding. The exam room was small but efficient, equipped with an ultrasound machine that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The nurse took Natalie's vitals, asked a series of questions about medical history, then smiled at them both. "Dr. Patel will be right in." "Congratulations, by the way." After she left, Natalie changed into a hospital gown while Jake studied the fetal development chart on the wall with intense focus. At 11 weeks, according to the illustrated diagram, the baby was about the size of a fig, had fingers and toes, could swallow and yawn. "You can turn around." Natalie was sitting on the exam table, the gown making her look smaller, somehow more exposed than he'd ever seen her. The CEO, who commanded boardrooms, had been stripped down to just another person facing uncertainty. Dr. Patel knocked before entering, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. She shook both their hands, then pulled up a rolling stool. "So," she looked at her tablet. "First pregnancy at 39. You're in good health. No major medical concerns. Your initial blood work looks excellent. How are you feeling? Nauseous?" Natalie's admission came quietly. Exhausted, emotional, all completely normal. The first trimester is usually the hardest in terms of symptoms. Dr. Patel glanced at Jake. "And you're the father?" "Yes." "Good. Partner support makes a tremendous difference." She turned back to Natalie. "Let's take a look at this baby, shall we?" The ultrasound machine hummed to life. Dr. Patel squeezed gel onto Natalie's abdomen, then pressed the wand against her skin. The screen flickered, showing shapes and shadows that Jake couldn't immediately interpret. He'd seen ultrasounds before, dozens of them during Julia's pregnancy with Lily, but this was different. This was his child. This impossible, microscopic person who'd been created by accident and was now undeniably real. Dr. Patel adjusted something, and suddenly there it was. A tiny figure curled in on itself, a flickering spot that the doctor identified as the heartbeat, arms and legs beginning to take shape, a head that looked disproportionately large. "There's your baby." Dr. Patel's voice carried warmth beneath the professionalism, measuring right on track for 11 weeks. Heartbeat is strong and steady at 162 beats per minute. Everything looks exactly as it should. Jake couldn't breathe. He'd prepared himself for this moment, thought he'd understood what it would mean, but seeing that tiny form moving on the screen obliterated every assumption. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't a problem to solve or a situation to manage. This was a person, a daughter or son who would have Natalie's intelligence maybe, or his stubbornness, or some combination of traits that would make them entirely themselves. Natalie's hand found his and squeezed hard. "Would you like to hear the heartbeat?" Natalie nodded, unable to speak. The sound filled the room, a rapid whooshing like horses galloping fast and strong and insistent. Proof of life where there had been only possibility before. Jake felt his throat close up. Beside him, Natalie made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "That's our baby." Her whisper was almost lost beneath the heartbeat's rhythm. "That's our baby." Dr. Patel let them listen for a long moment, then adjusted the wand to take measurements. She printed out several images, handing them to Natalie with a smile. "I'm moving your due date slightly based on the measurements. July 23rd. But babies come when they want to come, so anywhere from mid-July to early August is normal." She made notes on her tablet. "I want to see you back in 4 weeks for your next checkup. In the meantime, keep taking your prenatal vitamins, rest when you can, and call if you experience any bleeding, severe cramping, or persistent vomiting." After the appointment, they stood in the parking garage, neither quite ready to leave. Natalie clutched the ultrasound pictures like they were sacred texts, staring at the grainy images as if she could decode the future from black and white shapes. "I wasn't sure until just now." Her voice was barely audible over the garage's ambient noise. "If I wanted this, if I could do this." But I heard the heartbeat and everything else just stopped mattering. All the logistics and the fear and the questions, none of it was as important as that sound. Jake understood exactly what she meant. "You're going to be a mother. We're going to be parents." Natalie looked up at him. Both of us. I need to stop thinking of this as my problem and start thinking of it as our situation. Like you said. That's progress. I'm terrified. Me too. They stood there as other people came and went, loading into cars heading back to their lives. Finally, Natalie spoke again. Would you want to come over tonight? Not for anything romantic. Her clarification came quickly. Just to talk about the baby, about what comes next. I don't want to be alone with this right now. Jake thought about Lily, about the homework help she'd need and the bedtime routine they'd established. But Marcus could handle it. Marcus had told him last week to call any time he needed backup. I'd like that. I need to arrange childcare, but I can be there by 7. Bring Lily. The words came out in a rush, like Natalie had surprised herself. If you want, I should probably get to know her better if we're going to be in each other's lives. The invitation caught Jake off guard. Are you sure? No. But I think we're past the point of only doing things we're sure about. Lily was predictably excited about the unexpected outing. She changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on her favorite purple dress with stars scattered across the fabric. In the truck on the way to Natalie's building, she peppered Jake with questions. Does Ms. Cross have a big house? Does she have pets? Can she cook? What if she doesn't like me? She doesn't have pets. I don't know about her cooking. And she's going to love you because everyone loves you. Jake glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Remember, she's going to be part of our lives now. We want her to feel comfortable. I'll be nice. Extra nice. Super nice. Just be yourself, Bug. That's more than enough. Natalie's building was in the Gold Coast, a high-rise that screamed money from the street level up. The doorman greeted them with the kind of professional courtesy that made Jake acutely aware of his jeans and Lily's slightly scuffed shoes. They rode the elevator to the 28th floor in silence, Lily's hand tight in Jake's. The penthouse door opened before Jake could knock. Natalie stood there in jeans and a sweater, the most casual he'd ever seen her. Her eyes went to Lily immediately. You must be Lily. I've heard wonderful things about you. Lily stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd never met a stranger. Dad says you're having a baby and it's going to be my brother or sister. I'm going to teach them about space. Natalie blinked, then smiled. I'd like that. Come in, both of you. The apartment was exactly what Jake expected. Immaculate, sophisticated, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Lake Michigan and the city spreading south. Everything was white or glass or both furniture that probably cost more than Jake's annual salary. This was the physical manifestation of Natalie Cross's life. Beautiful, expensive, utterly unprepared for children. Lily gravitated immediately to the windows. Dad, you can see everything from up here? Look, there's Navy Pier. I see it, Bug. Natalie moved to the kitchen, pulling out drinks with the careful hospitality of someone who didn't entertain often. I have juice boxes. I wasn't sure what 7-year-olds drink. Juice boxes are perfect. Jake watched as she set them on the coffee table along with glasses of water for the adults. They settled in the living room, Lily on the floor despite the pristine white couch, examining the ultrasound pictures Natalie had laid out on the coffee table. That's the baby. Lily traced the outline with one finger. It's so small, it'll get bigger. Natalie's voice held uncertainty, like she was testing out this new role of talking to children. By the time it's born, it'll be about 20 inches long, like my doll collection. Lily looked up excited. I have 17 dolls. I could give some to the baby when it comes. Babies like dolls, right? I think so. Natalie glanced at Jake, seeking confirmation. Though we don't know yet if it's a boy or girl. Boys can like dolls too. Lily spoke with the absolute certainty of her generation. My friend James has 3 baby dolls and he takes really good care of them. He says when he grows up he wants to be a dad like mine. Jake felt his throat tighten. Natalie's expression shifted to something softer. They ordered pizza at Lily's insistence and ate while Lily entertained them with stories about school, her friends, her upcoming science project on the solar system. Natalie listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention, and Jake found himself seeing her differently. Not the CEO who terrified board members, but someone capable of meeting his daughter where she was. After dinner, Lily settled on the couch with her tablet, while Jake and Natalie moved to the kitchen under the pretense of cleaning up. She's amazing. Natalie rinsed plates, her movements uncertain in her own high-end kitchen. You've done an incredible job with her. She makes it easy. She's naturally kind. Thank you for bringing her. Natalie paused. I needed to see it. What you do. How you parent. Jake dried a glass, setting it carefully in the rack. I keep thinking I'm going to fail at this, that I'm going to be terrible at being a mother because I've spent my whole life focused on work instead of relationships. Lily asked me something yesterday. She asked if you were scared, and when I said you probably were, she told me I should tell you it's going to be okay because I'm really good at being a dad and I can help you learn. Natalie's hand stilled in the soapy water. She said that she's 7, but she's wise beyond her years. And she's right. You're not doing this alone. I'll help you figure it out. What if I'm not naturally good at it like you are? Jake set down the towel, turning to face her fully. I wasn't naturally good at it. When Julia died, I was a disaster. I couldn't figure out how to work the bottle warmer. I forgot to burp Lily and she'd spit up all over both of us. I once put her diaper on backward and didn't realize until it leaked everywhere. He smiled at the memories. But I kept trying. And eventually, through sheer repetition, I got better. That's all parenting is. Showing up every day and trying your best. Natalie wiped her eyes quickly. I'm so emotional lately. Everything makes me cry. Hormones. That's normal too. From the living room, Lily's voice called out, Ms. Cross, can I ask you something? They both moved back to find Lily still on the couch, tablet down. She looked between them with serious eyes. What is it, sweetheart? When the baby comes, are you going to live with us? Or is the baby going to have 2 houses? The question hung in the air. Jake and Natalie exchanged glances, neither having prepared for this particular scenario. We haven't figured that out yet. Jake kept his voice carefully neutral. What do you think would be best? Lily considered this with the gravity of a judge. I think the baby should have both parents together like Amanda's baby brother. He lives with both his parents. She paused. But I know you and Ms. Cross aren't married, so maybe that's different. It is different. Natalie's voice was gentle. Your dad and I are friends. We're going to work together to take care of the baby, but we might not live in the same house. But you could visit us and we could visit you. Definitely. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She returned to her tablet and the adults moved back to the kitchen. She's already thinking ahead, planning the logistics. She gets that from me. I'm a compulsive planner. We're going to have to figure out custody arrangements eventually, living situations, how we split time. Eventually. Jake agreed. But not tonight. Tonight, we just survived our first family dinner. That's enough. They stayed until Lily started yawning, her head drooping toward the couch cushions. Jake scooped her up and she wrapped her arms around his neck, automatically half asleep already. At the door, Natalie touched his arm. Thank you for coming, for bringing her. This helped more than you know. Same time next week, Natalie smiled. I'd like that. Driving home with Lily asleep in the back seat, Jake felt something shift inside him. This was real now. Not just an abstract concept or a problem to solve, but an actual future taking shape. In 7 months there would be another child, another person who depended on him, another life to protect and nurture and love. But this time he wouldn't be completely alone. Natalie would be there, imperfect and scared and figuring things out just like he was, but there. And somehow that made all the difference. The routine they'd established over the following weeks felt almost normal until the morning everything changed. Jake was in a strategy meeting with the building's property management team when his phone buzzed. Elena Parker's name appeared on the screen. He ignored it. The phone buzzed again. And again. Jake excused himself, stepping into the hallway. Elena. Her voice was tight with controlled panic. Jake, you need to get to 42, now. It's Ms. Cross. What happened? She collapsed. There's blood. The paramedics are with her. Jake didn't remember running. He didn't remember taking the stairs 4 at a time or pushing through the gathering crowd outside Natalie's office. He only remembered seeing her on the floor beside her desk, 2 EMTs crouched over her, an oxygen mask over her face. Her skin had that grayish cast he'd last seen on Julia in the hospital, and there was blood. Not a little. A spreading dark stain on her skirt that made Jake's vision narrow to a tunnel. Natalie. He was beside her before anyone could stop him. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes, intercepted him. "Are you family? I'm the father of her baby." That was enough. She stepped aside. "She's stable, but she's bleeding. We need to transport her to Northwestern Memorial immediately. You can ride with us." "The baby." "We won't know until the doctors examine her, but time matters." Natalie pulled the oxygen mask down slightly. "Jake." Her voice came out thin, terrified. "I'm scared." He took her hand, gripping it tight. "I know, but you're not alone." The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and medical jargon. Natalie kept her eyes closed, her hand never leaving his. At the hospital, they were separated immediately. Her wheeled toward the obstetrics wing, while a nurse directed him to a waiting room. He called Marcus first. "I need you to pick up Lily from school. Something's happened with Natalie." "Is she all right?" "I don't know yet. Just please get Lily. I'll call when I know more." The waiting room was painted the same calming blue as the clinic, but nothing about this felt calm. Jake paced his phone clutched in one hand, checking the time every 30 seconds, as if that would make the doctors appear faster. 47 minutes passed before a doctor emerged, still in scrubs. "Mr. Morrison." "I'm Dr. Martinez. Ms. Cross asked me to speak with you." She gestured to a quiet corner. The bleeding was caused by a subchorionic hematoma, essentially a collection of blood between the uterine wall and the gestational sac. It's not uncommon in early pregnancy, but it can be serious. "The baby." "The baby's heartbeat is still strong. But Ms. Cross is at high risk for further complications. We're admitting her for observation, and she's going to need complete bed rest for the foreseeable future. No work, minimal physical activity, constant monitoring. The relief that the baby was alive warred with fear of what came next. "Can I see her?" "She's being moved to a room now. Give us about 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. When a nurse finally led him to Natalie's room, he found her propped up in bed, an IV in her arm, monitors beeping steadily beside her. She looked exhausted but alert, her eyes finding his immediately. "The baby's okay." The words came before he could ask. "Dr. Martinez told me." "I know." Jake pulled a chair close to the bed, sitting down heavily. "You scared me. I scared myself." Natalie's laugh was shaky. "I was in the middle of a conference call and suddenly everything went wrong. There was so much blood, Jake. I thought—" Her voice broke. "But you didn't. The baby's still there. Still fighting. Dr. Martinez says I need bed rest. Complete bed rest for weeks, maybe months." Natalie's eyes were bright with frustrated tears. "I can't run a company from bed. You have one responsibility right now, and that's keeping yourself and this baby safe. Everything else can wait. The board won't see it that way. They'll see this as weakness proof that I can't handle the pressure. Then let them." Jake's voice was firm. "I don't care about the board or the optics or your reputation. I care about you and this baby surviving the next 7 months." Natalie studied his face. "When did you become so fierce about this?" "The moment I heard that heartbeat and realized I wanted this child more than I knew how to explain." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're going on bed rest. We'll figure out the work situation. How I can't just disappear for months. You can delegate. Your COO can handle day-to-day operations. I can help coordinate remote work. We'll set up systems so you can stay informed without the physical stress." Jake was already mentally reorganizing workflows, redistributing responsibilities. "You built a strong team. Trust them to keep things running. And if the board pushes back, I'll handle the board." She stared at him. "You can't fight my battles. Watch me." Dr. Martinez returned an hour later with more details. The hematoma was medium-sized, not the worst she'd seen, but concerning enough to warrant serious precautions. Natalie would stay in the hospital for 48 hours of observation. If everything remained stable, she could go home under strict instructions. No stairs if you can avoid them. Bathroom privileges only. Everything else happens in bed or on the couch. No lifting anything heavier than a phone. No stress. She looked at Jake. She's going to need help. Someone to bring meals, assist with basic needs, keep her company. Do you have family nearby? Natalie shook her head. My mother's in Seattle. We're not close. I'll do it. Both women looked at him. You have a daughter. Natalie's protest was automatic. A job. A life. And you have a baby that needs its mother alive and healthy. We'll make it work. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Good. I'll have the nurse bring you information packets on bed rest protocols and warning signs to watch for. Ms. Cross, I can't stress this enough. If you experience any additional bleeding, cramping, or unusual symptoms, you call immediately. We're not taking chances with this pregnancy. After the doctor left, Natalie turned to Jake with exhausted eyes. You don't have to do this, I know, but I want to. He settled back in the chair. I'm staying tonight. Marcus has Lily and she's fine. Tomorrow we'll figure out a schedule that works for everyone. Jake, stop fighting me on this. For once in your life, let someone help you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then so softly he almost missed it. I don't know how to be helpless. You're not helpless. You're human. There's a difference. That night, Jake dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair while Natalie slept fitfully between nurse checks. He called Lily before her bedtime, keeping his voice cheerful despite the fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. Is Ms. Cross okay? She's going to be fine. The baby too. But she needs to rest for a while, so I'm going to help take care of her. Like when I had the flu and you stayed home from work. Exactly like that. Can I make her a card with drawings that made me feel better when I was sick? Jake's throat tightened. I think she'd love that bug. Tell her I hope she feels better soon. And tell the baby to be good and not scare everyone. I will. Love you. Love you too, Dad. The next morning brought a parade of doctors and tests. Everything looked stable. The bleeding had stopped. The baby's heartbeat remained strong at 164 beats per minute. Natalie's vitals were good. By afternoon, Dr. Martinez cleared her for discharge with a stern reminder about the bed rest requirements. I'm serious about this. The doctor's tone left no room for argument. No cheating. Your body needs time to heal, and that baby needs a stable environment to grow. Push yourself too hard, and we could be looking at a very different outcome. The words hung heavy as Jake drove Natalie to her penthouse. She stared out the window silent, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. I keep thinking about all the things I need to do, the emails I need to send, the decisions that need to be made. And then I think about what Dr. Martinez said about pushing too hard, and I get terrified all over again. So we take it one day at a time, 1 hour if that's all you can manage. Getting Natalie settled in her apartment felt surreal. Jake brought pillows from her bedroom, arranging them on the couch so she could recline comfortably. He filled water bottles, organized her medications, set her phone and laptop within easy reach. This is going to drive me crazy. Natalie watched him work. Just sitting here. Then we'll find ways to make it bearable. Books, movies, work in small doses when you feel up to it. Lily wants to make you cards. She'll probably send one every day if I let her. Something in Natalie's expression softened. She's worried about me. She asked me last night if the baby was scared when you got sick. What did you tell her, that the baby was safe because you were being brave? Natalie's eyes went bright. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified and out of control and completely useless. Brave doesn't mean not scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. Jake leaned forward. You're choosing to protect this baby even though it's costing you everything you've worked for. That's the definition of bravery. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I need to call the board. Let them know what's happening. Not today. Today you rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out the work situation. But tomorrow brought its own complications. Richard Blackwell appeared at Natalie's building at 8 in the morning, his Brooks Brothers suit immaculate, his expression carefully neutral. Ms. Cross. He stood in her living room like he'd been invited. though Jake had opened the door with clear reluctance. "I came as soon as I heard about your medical situation. The board is concerned." Natalie, still in pajamas on the couch, sat up straighter despite Jake's warning look. "I appreciate the concern, Richard. I'm recovering and will provide updates as appropriate. The board has called an emergency meeting." Blackwell's eyes flicked to Jake, then back to Natalie. "We need to discuss interim leadership given your situation. I'm recovering from a medical complication. I'm not incapacitated. Nevertheless, the perception of instability in leadership is concerning to our investors." After Blackwell left, Natalie was silent for a long time. "They're going to use this." Jake could see her mind working, calculating angles and strategies even from enforced rest. "My pregnancy. The bed rest. Richard's been looking for an excuse to push me out for 3 years. Then we fight that battle when you're healthy enough to fight it properly. Right now you focus on staying pregnant. That's the only thing that matters. If I show weakness now, I'll never recover my position." "You're not showing weakness. You're showing priorities." But Natalie's fear proved prescient. The board meeting happened Friday morning, conducted via video call from Natalie's laptop. Jake sat beside her, just out of camera frame, watching as she presented a delegation plan with the same crisp authority she'd use in person. Richard Blackwell waited until she finished. "With all due respect, Natalie, this situation raises questions about your judgment. Getting pregnant at this stage in your career by a subordinate, no less, suggests a lack of professionalism that concerns me." The words landed like grenades. Natalie's face went pale. Jake could see her preparing a response, her mouth opening, but he couldn't let this stand. He stepped into the camera frame. "This is Jake Morrison. I'd like to address Mr. Blackwell's comment." The board members stared clearly, not expecting the maintenance supervisor to appear. "Mr. Morrison, this is a board meeting." Blackwell's condescension was thick enough to choke on. "Your presence is inappropriate. You made it appropriate when you turned my personal life into business discussion." Jake kept his voice level, but there was steel underneath. "Ms. Cross and I are 2 adults who made a personal choice. Her pregnancy doesn't diminish her capability any more than my being a single father diminishes mine. If this board judges her fitness to lead based on her personal life rather than her 20-year track record of building this company from nothing to Fortune 500, then the problem isn't her judgment. It's yours." The silence on the line was absolute. Susan Mitchell, one of the other board members, spoke up. "Mr. Morrison makes a valid point. I move we accept Natalie's delegation plan and table this discussion indefinitely." The vote passed 5-3. Blackwell's face was a mask of controlled fury. After the call ended, Natalie looked at Jake with an expression somewhere between shock and gratitude. "You just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in Chicago's tech industry." "Good. He made an enemy of me first." "Jake, Richard Blackwell owns 18% of Vanguard. If he convinces enough shareholders that I'm a liability, he could force me out entirely. Everything I've built could be gone. Then we'll build something new." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both sustainable and surreal. Jake split his time between his apartment work and Natalie's penthouse. Lily stayed with Marcus 3 nights a week, sleeping at the penthouse the other 4. Natalie worked from the couch in carefully measured doses, Jake monitoring to ensure she didn't overdo it. And slowly, almost without either of them noticing, the boundaries between necessary proximity and something deeper began to blur. It happened in small moments. Jake's hand on Natalie's back when she struggled to stand, steadying her through the dizziness. Her laugh at his terrible jokes, the sound warmer each time. The way they'd started finishing each other's sentences during conference calls, an unconscious synchronization that came from spending hours together every day. Lily noticed. One night after visiting Natalie, she asked the question Jake had been dreading. "Dad, do you love Ms. Cross?" They were in the truck, city lights streaming past. Jake kept his eyes on the road. "Why do you ask that, Bug?" "Because you look at her the way you look at Mom's picture sometimes, like she's important. Out of the mouths of babes. Ms. Cross is important. She's your sister's mother. That makes her part of our family." "But do you love her? Like the way people in movies love each other?" Jake pulled into their building's parking lot, putting the truck in park before turning to face his daughter. Love is complicated, sweetheart. There are different kinds. I love you like a father loves his daughter. Completely. Unconditionally. I loved your mom like a husband loves his wife. What I feel for Ms. Cross is different from both of those. Different how I'm still figuring that out. But I know I care about her. I want her to be happy and healthy. I want to be there for her and the baby. Lily considered this with her usual seriousness. I think you should tell her that. She looks happy when you're there. You think so, I know so. Girls can tell these things. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just noticing now. That night, lying in bed, Jake thought about Lily's question. Did he love Natalie? Not the uncomplicated love he'd had for Julia, built on years of shared history and chosen partnership. This was something else, forged in crisis, complicated by circumstances, but real nonetheless. He cared about her intelligence, her determination, the vulnerability she showed only to him. He liked the way she listened when Lily talked about space, really listened instead of just humoring a child. He appreciated her dry humor, her refusal to be pitied, her fierce protectiveness of the baby they'd created. But love. Love meant risk. It meant opening himself up to loss again, and he wasn't sure he was brave enough for that. His phone buzzed. Natalie texting from across the city. Can't sleep. Thinking about everything. Jake stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. A dozen responses came to mind, each revealing more than he was ready to admit. Finally he typed, "Me too. We'll figure it out." It was safer that way. Non-committal. Friendly but not intimate. But as he set the phone down and closed his eyes, Jake knew he was lying to himself. This stopped being just co-parenting weeks ago. Maybe it had never been just that. Maybe from the moment he'd taken her hand in that hospital room and promised she wasn't alone, they'd been building towards something neither of them knew how to name. The question wasn't whether his feelings were real. The question was what he was going to do about them. The answer came at 34 weeks, though not in the way Jake expected. He was reviewing maintenance logs at Natalie's dining table, his makeshift office for the past months, when he heard her gasp from the couch. Not the small sounds of discomfort that had become routine, but something sharper. Jake. He was across the room in 3 strides. Natalie's hand was pressed to her enormous belly, her face drained of color. Something's wrong. Then he saw it. The wetness spreading across the white couch, darkening the fabric in a way that made his pulse spike. Your water broke. It's too early. Panic cracked through her voice. She's not supposed to come for another 6 weeks. Jake, something's wrong. He was already moving, grabbing her hospital bag from the closet where it had been packed for weeks, pulling out his phone to call for help. But Natalie doubled over with a contraction, a sound tearing from her throat that Jake remembered from Julia's labor with Lily. We need to go now. I can't. Another contraction hit before the first had fully released. They're too close together. Jake dialed 911. His fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, asking questions. Jake answered on autopilot while he helped Natalie breathe through another wave of pain. Paramedics are 4 minutes out. Can you time the contractions? Less than 2 minutes apart. The dispatcher said something else, but Jake's attention was on Natalie, whose hand had found his and was gripping with a strength that would leave bruises. I'm scared. The admission came between gasps. If something happens to her, nothing's going to happen. You're both going to be fine. But he'd said those words to Julia too, and Julia had died anyway, so Jake didn't know if he believed them or if belief even mattered when biology had its own agenda. The ambulance arrived in 3 minutes. Jake rode with Natalie, her hand never leaving his, while the EMTs worked around them with efficient competence. One of them, a young man with steady hands, explained that premature labor at 34 weeks was serious but manageable, that the baby's lungs should be developed enough that Northwestern Memorial had an excellent NICU. Jake heard the words without processing them. His entire focus had narrowed to Natalie's face, pale and frightened, and trying so hard to be brave. At the hospital they were separated. Natalie disappeared behind swinging doors marked labor and delivery, while a nurse directed Jake to a consultation room. Dr. Martinez appeared within minutes, still pulling on a surgical cap. The baby's in distress. Her heartbeat is dropping with each contraction. We need to do an emergency C-section. How bad? Bad enough that we can't wait. I need your consent as the father and Natalie's as the mother. Time matters here. She led him to a prep room where Natalie was already being readied for surgery, an anesthesiologist explaining the spinal block while nurses moved with choreographed precision. Natalie's eyes found Jake's the moment he entered. They want to do a C-section. I know. He moved to her side, taking her hand. It's the safest option. But I wanted natural birth. We discussed this. The protest came out weak fear overriding planning. Plans change. Our girl needs to come out now, and she needs to come out safely. Natalie gripped his hand harder. If something goes wrong, if you have to choose, you save the baby. You hear me? You save her. Nothing's going to go wrong. But even as he said it, Jake was remembering Julia's final days, remembering all the promises he'd made that circumstances had rendered meaningless. He couldn't promise Natalie that biology would cooperate, that medicine would be enough, that wanting something badly enough made it true. All he could promise was presence. You're not alone. I'm here. Mr. Morrison. A nurse appeared with scrubs. If you want to be present for the surgery, you need to change now. Everything moved quickly after that. Jake scrubbed his hands until they were raw, pulled on the surgical gear. Followed a nurse through doors that led to an operating room bright with fluorescent precision. Natalie was already on the table, a blue curtain blocking her view of her own abdomen, her face exposed and terrified. Jake took his position at her head, one hand finding hers immediately. I can't feel anything below my chest. Her voice shook. Is that normal? That's the spinal block working. You're not supposed to feel it. Dr. Martinez appeared on the other side of the curtain, her eyes visible above her surgical mask. We're starting now. You'll feel some pressure but no pain. The baby should be out in less than 10 minutes. Jake kept his eyes on Natalie's face, not wanting to see what was happening beyond the curtain. He talked to her in a steady stream, reminding her of Lily's excitement about being a big sister of the nursery they'd finally set up in her penthouse last week, of all the dreams they'd built around this baby who was about to arrive 6 weeks early. Then he heard it. A thin, reedy cry that was the most beautiful sound in the world. It's a girl. Dr. Martinez's voice carried relief beneath the professionalism. Small, but fierce. A nurse brought their daughter over, wrapped in blankets and wearing a tiny hat. She was impossibly small, her face scrunched in red indignation at being pulled from her warm home 6 weeks before schedule. Her fists waved in protest. Natalie, look. Natalie turned her head, and the sound she made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She's so small. 4 pounds 3 ounces. The nurse's voice was warm. Her lungs sound strong. We'll need to take her to the NICU for observation given her gestational age, but she's breathing on her own, which is excellent. Can I hold her? Natalie's voice was desperate. Please, just for a second. The nurse placed the baby against Natalie's chest for a brief moment. Their daughter opened eyes that were a dark, indeterminate blue and seemed to focus on her mother's face. Hi, baby. Natalie's whisper was for the infant alone. Hi, Grace. We've been waiting for you. Grace Anna Morrison Cross, the name they'd decided on 3 weeks ago after hours of debate. Grace for new beginnings. Anna for the mother Lily had lost. All too soon, the nurse had to take Grace to the NICU for assessment. Jake watched them go, his heart following that tiny bundle even as he stayed with Natalie while Dr. Martinez finished the surgery. She's real. Natalie's voice held wonder beneath the exhaustion. All these months, and now she's actually here. She's perfect. You did so well. We did well. Together. The recovery room was quiet, dimly lit. Natalie drifted in and out of sleep while Jake sat beside her, unable to rest despite the exhaustion pulling at him. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. How is she? Jake typed back. Grace Anna Morrison Cross. 4 pounds 3 ounces. In NICU but breathing on her own. Mom recovering well. The response came immediately. Sophie's been asking every 10 minutes for updates. Jake smiled despite his fatigue. Tell her she has a baby sister. Grace. She's in NICU but doing well. Can we visit tomorrow? Let them both settle first. Dr. Martinez appeared a few hours later with an update. Grace was stable, maintaining her temperature, taking small amounts of formula. She'd need to stay in the NICU for monitoring probably 2 to 3 weeks given her prematurity, but the initial assessment was positive. When can we see her? Once Natalie's cleared from recovery, I'll have the nurse take you both down. The NICU was a controlled environment of beeping monitors and hushed efficiency. Nurses moved between isolettes with practiced care, tending to infants who'd arrived into the world before they were ready. Jake and Natalie scrubbed in at the sink following protocols designed to protect the vulnerable. Grace lay beneath warming lights in an isolette monitors tracking her every breath and heartbeat. She looked even smaller here, surrounded by medical equipment, but her chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. Natalie reached through the porthole, her finger stroking Grace's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around hers. She's holding my hand. The wonder in Natalie's voice was absolute. She knows her mama. They stayed there for hours, taking turns reaching in to touch their daughter, memorizing every detail of her face. When Natalie finally had to return to her room for rest, she went reluctantly, looking back at the isolette until it disappeared from view. The first night was long. Grace needed to be fed every 2 hours, her tiny stomach unable to hold much at once. Natalie tried to nurse, but Grace was too small, too weak to latch properly, so they supplemented with bottles of pumped milk and formula. Jake took the midnight and 3 a.m. feedings, letting Natalie sleep in fragmented stretches between the pain medication wearing off and the reality of surgical recovery setting in. Marcus arrived the next morning with Lily, who'd armed herself with drawings and a stuffed giraffe nearly as big as she was. "Can I see her?" "Not yet, Bug. She needs to stay in the special nursery for a while. But you can look through the window." Lily pressed her face to the NICU viewing glass, her breath fogging the surface. "She's tiny, like a doll. She'll get bigger. You were small like that once, too. Can I talk to her?" "The nurses said babies can hear." "Of course." Lily spoke to the glass, her voice serious. "Hi, Grace. I'm your big sister, Lily. I brought you a giraffe because giraffes are the best animals. They can see really far because they're so tall, and they have purple tongues, which is cool. When you're bigger, I'm going to teach you about space and how to read and everything you need to know about being awesome." Jake watched his daughters, one chattering excitedly, one sleeping peacefully in her isolette, and felt his heart expand in a way he hadn't thought possible after Julia. This was his family now, complicated, unconventional, absolutely perfect. Natalie was released from the hospital 3 days later, though Grace remained in NICU. The transition was brutal. Leaving the hospital without her baby felt fundamentally wrong to Natalie. She cried the entire drive back to the penthouse, and Jake held her hand, understanding in a way only another parent could. They fell into a new routine. Mornings, Jake took Lily to school, then met Natalie at the hospital where they'd spend hours with Grace. Afternoons, they'd work remotely from the NICU waiting room when they couldn't be at Grace's bedside. Evenings, Lily would join them for brief visits before bedtime. The board meeting Natalie had been preparing for was postponed without argument. Even Richard Blackwell had the decency to back off when news of the emergency delivery spread. Garrett Thompson, Vanguard's COO, stepped into interim leadership, seamlessly keeping Natalie updated, but not expecting her to make major decisions while Grace was in NICU. Slowly, day by day, Grace grew stronger. She graduated from the isolette to an open crib, started taking more formula, gained weight in steady increments. The monitors came off one by one until she was breathing room air with no support, maintaining her temperature, without assistance, showing every sign of a healthy newborn who'd simply arrived ahead of schedule. On day 17, Dr. Martinez gave them the news they'd been waiting for. "Grace is ready to go home." Natalie burst into tears. Jake just held her, his own eyes suspiciously bright, while Lily jumped up and down with excitement loud enough that a nurse had to remind her this was a hospital. The drive home with Grace was the most terrifying experience of Jake's life, and he'd done it before with Lily. Every bump felt catastrophic, Every other car seemed too close. Every traffic light took forever. Natalie sat in the back with the car seat, her hand resting protectively on Grace's chest, feeling her breathe. Lily had insisted on decorating the penthouse with welcome home signs and balloons. When they walked in with Grace, she presented her sister with a carefully wrapped gift. It's a mobile of planets and stars to hang over her crib, so she can learn about space while she sleeps. Natalie's eyes filled again. That's perfect, Lily. Thank you. That night, after Lily had gone to sleep in what had become her regular room at the penthouse, and Grace was settled in the bassinet beside Natalie's bed, Jake and Natalie sat together on the couch they'd occupied for so many months. We did it. Natalie's head rested on his shoulder. We actually did it. You had doubts. So many doubts. She laughed softly. I thought I'd be terrible at this. That I'd panic the first time she cried, or mess up feeding her, or drop her, or any of the 1,000 catastrophes I imagined. And she cried an hour ago and I didn't panic. I just picked her up and held her until she settled. It felt natural, like maybe I can actually do this. I told you you could. Natalie lifted her head to look at him. You've told me a lot of things over the past months, that I wasn't alone, that I could be both a CEO and a mother, that you loved me. She paused. I didn't believe most of them at the time. And now I believe all of them. She kissed him softly. I love you, Jake Morrison. I love the way you show up, the way you fight for what matters, the way you made me believe I deserve to be fought for. You do deserve it. You deserve everything. From the bedroom, Grace made a small sound. Not quite a cry, just a sleepy protest. They both froze listening, but she settled back into sleep without intervention. I should probably move to the bedroom. Be close in case she needs me. We should probably move to the bedroom. Jake's voice carried a question. If you want. If you're ready for that. Natalie studied his face in the dim light. Are you asking to stay the night, or are you asking for more than that? I'm asking for whatever you're willing to give. One night or every night. Your choice. Every night. Natalie's answer came without hesitation. I want every night, Jake. I want to wake up with you beside me and fall asleep knowing you're there. I want Lily running through the apartment and Grace crying at 2 a.m. and all the messy, complicated reality of actually being a family. Then that's what we'll have. They moved to the bedroom, Jake settling beside Natalie in the bed, where he'd never slept before despite all the nights he'd spent at her apartment. Grace slept in her bassinet within arm's reach, her tiny chest rising and falling with steady breaths. I need to tell you something. Natalie's voice was quiet in the darkness. About work. Jake tensed slightly. What about it? I've been thinking about what you said. About Julia and how you regretted all the time you spent chasing career advancement instead of being present. About how none of that mattered when she got sick. Natalie turned to face him. I don't want to have those regrets. I don't want to miss Grace's childhood because I was too focused on board meetings and quarterly reports. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to step back. Not quit. I love Vanguard too much for that. But I'm going to restructure my role, delegate more, work reasonable hours instead of 60-hour weeks, actually use my parental leave instead of checking emails from the hospital bed. She took his hand. I built that company to create something meaningful. But this you and Lily and Grace, this is what's actually meaningful. I don't want to sacrifice it for anything. The board might not like that. The board can adjust or replace me. Either way, I'll be fine. Natalie smiled. You were right about something else, too. If I lost Vanguard, I could build something new. But I can't build a new family. This is irreplaceable. Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last hour. I was starting to worry. He kissed her then, long and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, Grace was making small sounds that meant she'd be demanding food soon. I'll get her. We'll get her together. And that, Jake thought, watching Natalie lift their daughter from the bassinet with capable hands, was the perfect metaphor for everything they'd built. Through crisis and fear and uncertainty, they'd created something real and lasting. The months that followed were chaotic and exhausting and absolutely perfect. Natalie did step back at work, restructuring her role to focus on strategy while Garrett handled daily operations. The board grumbled but accepted it, especially when the company's performance didn't suffer under the new arrangement. Richard Blackwell made one last attempt to challenge her leadership in a shareholders' meeting, citing her reduced hours as evidence of waning commitment. Susan Mitchell shut him down with a presentation on Natalie's strategic initiatives and their projected 5-year impact. The shareholders voted overwhelmingly to maintain current leadership. Jake transferred to a different building in the facilities management company's portfolio, taking a promotion to senior operations manager that came with better pay and no overlap with Vanguard Solutions. It meant starting over in some ways, building new relationships and proving himself in a new role. But it also meant he and Natalie could be together without the shadow of workplace dynamics. Lily thrived in her role as big sister. She'd appointed herself Grace's primary educator, reading to the baby from astronomy books before Grace could even focus her eyes properly, showing her the mobile above the crib, explaining with absolute seriousness that space was the coolest thing in the universe and Grace would understand when she was older. Marcus became a regular fixture at the penthouse, bringing takeout and staying to help with whatever needed doing. He and Natalie had developed an easy friendship built on their mutual investment in Jake's happiness and their shared willingness to mock him when necessary. 6 months after Grace's birth, Jake stood in the same conference room where Natalie had first told him she was pregnant. But this time they weren't discussing quarterly projections or market analysis. We wanted to share some news with everyone. Natalie's hand found Jake's across the table. "Jake and I are getting married." The room erupted in applause and congratulations. Garrett hugged them both. Even the most skeptical board members smiled genuinely. Later in Natalie's office, with Grace sleeping in a portable crib in the corner and Lily doing homework at the small table, Jake pulled his fiancée into his arms. No regrets. Natalie looked around the room, at the evidence of her successful career, at their sleeping daughter, at Lily hunched over math problems. Then she looked at him, and her smile was radiant. "Not a single one. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. We gave each other everything. That's how partnerships work." "Then here's to partnership." Natalie kissed him softly. "To showing up when it matters. To choosing family over fear. To building something beautiful from something unexpected." Grace stirred in her crib, making the small sounds that meant she'd wake soon. Lily looked up from her homework, ready to help with her sister. And Jake Morrison, who'd once thought his capacity for love had died with Julia, felt gratitude overflow for this messy, complicated, absolutely perfect family they'd created together. They weren't bound by obligation or accident anymore. They were bound by choice, by love, by the daily decision to show up for each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The wedding happened 3 months later in the penthouse, intimate and perfect. Marcus stood as best man. Susan Mitchell was Natalie's maid of honor. Lily served as flower girl, taking her duties with utmost seriousness. Grace, now 9 months old and just starting to pull herself up on furniture, spent the ceremony being passed between relatives, gurgling happily at all the attention. Natalie wore a simple dress, cream-colored and elegant. Jake wore a suit Marcus had helped him pick out, navy blue and perfectly tailored. When they exchanged vows, Natalie's voice broke on the words about choosing each other every day, and Jake had to pause to collect himself when he promised to love her children as his own. Because Lily was his own, had been since Julia died and left him to figure out fatherhood alone. And Grace was his own, born 6 weeks early and fierce from her first breath. And Natalie was his own now too, this brilliant woman who'd walked into a maintenance supervisor's life and detonated his carefully controlled world in the best possible way. The reception was small, close friends, family, the Vanguard employees who'd become genuine friends over the months of crisis and recovery. They ate food catered from Natalie's favorite restaurant and drank champagne and took turns holding Grace while Lily explained to anyone who would listen that she was responsible for bringing her parents together because she'd told her dad to help Ms. Cross when she was scared. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jake found himself on the penthouse balcony looking out over the city. Chicago spread below in geometric patterns of light, 28 floors of distance between him and the streets where people lived their ordinary lives. His life wasn't ordinary anymore. Hadn't been since that Tuesday afternoon in Natalie's office when she'd spoken 5 words that changed everything. Natalie joined him on the balcony, Grace asleep against her shoulder. "What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How impossible this all seemed 8 months ago. And now it's the only thing that makes sense." They stood there together, the city below and the sky above, their daughter breathing softly between them. Inside, Lily was showing Marcus her latest drawing, her voice carrying through the open door with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted that love could expand to hold everyone she needed. Jake thought about Julia, about the promise he'd made to her in the hospital. "Don't let our daughter forget me. Don't be alone forever." He'd kept both promises. Lily remembered her mother through stories and photos and the middle name she carried. And Jake wasn't alone anymore. He'd found something he hadn't been looking for, built a family from impossible circumstances, learned that the heart's capacity for love was infinite if you were brave enough to let it grow. Natalie shifted Grace to her other shoulder. "I've been thinking about work, about the next phase. Yeah, I want to start something new. A consulting firm focused on women in tech, helping them navigate the impossible choice between career and family, showing them they don't have to choose." Natalie looked at him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without your insistence that I didn't have to sacrifice one for the other. I want to give that gift to other women." "That sounds perfect. When do we start?" You think I'm letting you start a company without my operational expertise. Someone has to make sure the HVAC systems work." Natalie laughed, the sound carrying across the balcony. "I love you, Jake Morrison. I love you, Natalie Morrison." The name was new, officially hers as of this afternoon. Natalie Cross Morrison on legal documents. Natalie Morrison in daily life. She'd insisted on taking his name, explaining that she'd spent 39 years being Natalie Cross, and it was time to be someone new. Someone who was part of something bigger than herself. 6 months later, they moved out of the penthouse. Not far. Still Gold Coast, still a building with a doorman, but into a 4-bedroom apartment with room for Lily and Grace to each have their own space, for Jake to have a home office, for Natalie to have a workspace separate from the bedroom. The new consulting firm, Vanguard Women in Tech, launched to immediate success. Natalie leveraged her reputation and network to build something meaningful, working 30 hours a week instead of 60, home for dinner every night, present for bedtime stories and weekend park visits. Jake's promotion at the facilities management company came with a title change to Director of Operations and a salary that finally felt like compensation for expertise rather than hourly labor. He still got his hands dirty when a system needed fixing, but he also managed teams and built protocols and proved that blue-collar experience was invaluable in an industry that often prioritized credentials over capability. Lily started 3rd grade reading at a 6th grade level, her teachers recommending acceleration programs and gifted education. Grace took her first steps at 11 months, pulling herself up on the coffee table and launching herself toward her big sister with fearless determination. And through it all, Jake and Natalie showed up for each other. Through sleepless nights and toddler tantrums. Through board meetings and building emergencies. Through the ordinary chaos of family life that was somehow more sacred than anything either of them had achieved alone. 2 years after Grace's birth, Natalie discovered she was pregnant again. Unplanned like the first time, but wanted with an intensity that surprised them both. "How do you feel about 3 kids?" She showed Jake the positive test on a Sunday morning, Grace toddling around the living room and Lily absorbed in a book about exoplanets. Jake looked at his wife, at their daughters, at the life they'd built from impossible beginnings. "I feel like we can handle anything." The pregnancy was easier this time. No complications, no bed rest. Natalie worked steadily through the months, Jake supporting without smothering. And when their son arrived on a clear autumn afternoon, healthy and loud and absolutely perfect, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle they hadn't known they were solving. They named him Marcus William Morrison after the brother-in-law who'd supported Jake through the darkest times and the father Natalie had lost to a heart attack when she was in medical school. Lily appointed herself responsible for all three of her siblings, now Grace Marcus, and the memory of the mother she'd lost but never forgotten. She taught Grace how to read. She explained to baby Marcus about the solar system while he drooled and grabbed at her hair. She asked Jake questions about Julia that got harder every year but never stopped being important. And Jake answered them honestly, sharing memories that kept his first wife alive for the daughter who barely remembered her, because love didn't run out. It didn't get divided or diminished. It multiplied with every person you chose to let in. 5 years after that Tuesday afternoon in Natalie's office, Jake stood in the maintenance bay of the building where he now worked as Director of Operations training a new hire on HVAC systems. The young man was eager, hard-working, reminded Jake of himself a decade ago. "You've got good instincts." Jake wiped his hands on a rag, the familiar smell of machine oil grounding him. "Keep learning. Keep asking questions. Don't let anyone make you feel less than because you work with your hands instead of sitting behind a desk." The young man nodded seriously. "My guidance counselor told me I was wasting my potential not going to college." Jake thought about his own path. Community college classes he'd never finished. Career built on experience and determination rather than credentials. The life he'd created that looked nothing like what anyone would have predicted. Potential isn't wasted when you choose a path that makes you happy. College is one route. Skilled trades is another. What matters is that you show up every day and do the work with integrity. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. "I've got to head out. My daughter's school play starts in an hour." The new hire looked surprised. "You're leaving early for a school play." Jake smiled. "Every single time. That's what matters. Not the systems or the buildings or the career. The people waiting for you at the end of the day." He drove to Lily's middle school where Natalie was already waiting in the auditorium with Grace and Marcus. Grace, now 7, sat on her mother's lap reading a chapter book. Marcus, 3 years old, and a whirlwind of energy climbed over the seats until Jake scooped him up. Daddy Marcus's hug was all enthusiasm and sticky hands. "Lily's the star. She's one of the stars, buddy. There's a whole cast, but she's the best one." Natalie leaned over to kiss Jake. "How was work? Good. Trained the new hire. He's going to be solid once he gets more experience." The lights dimmed. The play began. Lily appeared on stage in costume, delivering her lines with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her right to take up space. Jake watched his daughter, his first daughter, the one who'd made him a father who'd survived losing her mother and gained a family she'd never expected, and felt pride swell in his chest. After the play, they went for ice cream, a family tradition Natalie had started when Grace turned 4, proclaiming that every achievement deserved celebration and ice cream was the perfect medium. They sat outside despite the October chill, Marcus stealing bites from everyone's cups. Grace explaining to Lily the actual scientific reason why ice cream tasted good. Natalie and Jake sharing glances across the table that communicated entire conversations without words. This was the life they'd built. Imperfect. Chaotic. Everything neither of them had planned for, and exactly what they both needed. That night, after the kids were asleep and the apartment was finally quiet, Jake and Natalie stood in their bedroom getting ready for bed with the comfortable choreography of long familiarity. "Do you ever think about that day?" Natalie pulled on pajamas. Her voice casual, but the question weighted. "When I told you I was pregnant, when everything changed, every day, would you do it differently? If you could go back, knowing everything you know now." Jake thought about the fear, the uncertainty, the impossible leap of faith required to choose involvement over safety, partnership over distance, love over protection. Not one thing. Every moment led us here. I wouldn't change a second. Natalie crossed the room, wrapping her arms around him. "I spent 39 years convinced I didn't want this. Family, marriage, children. I thought success meant climbing higher, achieving more, leaving a legacy through work. And now I know that legacy is the 3 kids asleep down the hall. It's the woman who used to be my competitor becoming my best friend. It's the man who fixed my air conditioning teaching me what love actually means." She pulled back to look at him. "You changed my life, Jake Morrison. We changed each other's lives. That's the whole point." They climbed into bed, the monitors on the nightstand broadcasting the soft sounds of their children sleeping. Marcus's gentle snores, Grace's occasional sleep-talking about planets and stars. Lily's room silent because at 11 she'd declared herself too old for monitors, though Jake still checked on her twice a night anyway. In the city below, life continued its chaotic rhythm. Maintenance workers kept buildings running. CEOs made impossible decisions. Single parents struggled through another day of doing everything alone. People made choices in hotel rooms that would reshape their futures. And somewhere someone was standing in an office being told news they never expected, facing a decision that would define everything that came after. Jake hoped they'd be brave enough to say yes, to choose possibility over fear, to understand that the best things in life came from the moments when you stopped controlling outcomes and started trusting the process. Because he'd learned something in the 5 years since Natalie had spoken those 5 world-altering words. Love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It wasn't about having all the answers before you started the journey. Love was about showing up, day after day, through fear and uncertainty and chaos, through hospital rooms and board meetings and 2 a.m. feedings, through the mundane miracle of ordinary life shared with people who chose you back. It was about believing that the heart had infinite capacity for growth if you were brave enough to let it expand. And Jake Morrison, who'd once thought his capacity for love had died with his first wife, now understood the truth. Love didn't run out. It multiplied. And sometimes it arrived in the most impossible packages, whispered across a desk, grown in adversity, born 6 weeks early, and cherished forever. He looked at his wife sleeping peacefully beside him after another day of their complicated, beautiful life. He thought about his children safe in their beds, dreaming of stars and stories and the infinite possibilities ahead. And Jake closed his eyes, grateful for every impossible moment that had led him here to this life he never planned and couldn't imagine living without.